everyone. Welcome to the 12th episode of the TCLF One on One series. Through the One on One series, we aim to interact with the best legal professionals from India and around the world. Well, today we will be talking about a very interesting yet rarely explored field of law, that is aviation law. And we have none other than Mr. Syed Tamjeed Ahmed as our guest for this episode. Mr. Ahmed works with Sareen and Company, which is a boutique aviation law firm, commercial law firm specializing in aviation law. He holds an advanced LLM degree from the University of Leiden in air and space law. He has previously worked as a government affairs trainee with Boeing. Sir has also published a number of articles on the field. In every sense, he is an expert on this field of law. And sir, we're truly honored to have you here. Well, so just to set the tone for this interview, uh, you specialize in an area of law, as I've mentioned, which is not very much popular with law students and professionals in India. In fact, many law students do not have research centers or, do not have air law as a part of their curriculum. So, how did you develop an interest in this field in aviation law, and what was your first encounter with the subject?
Uh, well, I must say that in India we have colleges like Nalsa, Hyderabad, and UGS Calcutta, which do have centers for aviation law. But you are right, yes, that primarily aviation law has not been a very important topic or not the first choice of law schools or for lawyers in India. It's true. Now, going back to my point, so I always wanted to be a pilot. That is something which was very clear. But due to certain issues, it did not work out. And then when in my third year of my law school, we had this topic on subtopic under international law on aviation law. And it is there for the first time I had this kind of, I must say, an acquaintance with this topic of aviation law. And then I researched more. And then in my fifth year of my law school, I was very sure that I had to do a master's in aviation law. And then it worked out. Yeah. So that was my entire area of aviation law.
All right. And so, just to follow up on this question, what do you think is the reason or are the reasons behind this unpopular nature of the subject?
I would say it's a very niche area of law. That's one of the reasons. Second reason, which I feel why it has not been touched much, is that people at large, and that's not only in India, abroad, it's all around the world, they don't really understand this topic of aviation law much. It is seen more from the prism of international law. So just to clear your mind, aviation law itself is a very broad concept. It has various topics under it. For example, we have aircraft balancing, we have aircraft insurance law, we have aircraft liability law, we have the consumer law of aviation, and we also have something known as the aerospace law, which is basically, I must say, an interrelation between aviation and space law. So that's not the case in India. It's gearing up now. Many law schools and many lawyers in India and law firms now, for that matter, are exploring this area of law. And the reason why aviation law will become an important topic in India is it's very simple. You see, India is a big country. Now we are the world's seventh largest country. We have a huge population. So you need to move these people. And the trains or the road transport cannot be the only mode of transport. And that is the reason aviation or aerospace will take or is taking a very good, I must say, founding in India. Just to give an example, in India, it's a big country with a huge population, and even then, India only has 600 aircraft, nearly 600 or 700 aircraft on its roads, whereas US has around 6,000 aircraft. And as per by Boeing and Airbus, we will be requiring at least 2,000 more aircraft in decades. So when you have these new aircraft coming in, you will have the issues of financing coming up. So that it is there you will require aircraft financing lawyers. You will require insurance of these things happening. And you'll have this insurance lawyers coming up. And when more people are flying on aircraft, we'll also have consumer disputes coming up. And because of that, we will have the concept of liability law coming up. So that is the reason I believe in the coming future, in the coming decade, in this decade, by the way, itself, we'll see much more for aviation law coming up.
Well, that's quite an interesting perspective to the issue. I'm sure that not many of us know about these statistics that you would remember that India, as you know, has these dearth of aircrafts. and it's truly fascinating. Now, as I mentioned in your introduction as well, you have worked as a government affairs trainee at BOE. So I wanted to talk about that. How did the opportunity come about, and what was the experience?
Well, it's very funny. So in Leiden, we are taught mostly by practitioners, not by professors. So one of doing directors had come to teach us, and she was teaching us on the topic of sustainable aviation. And somehow it worked well, and then she asked me to apply for Boeing, and I applied there. It went on well, and I got through Boeing. Now that was a basic thing, and in Boeing the experience was very good. So I was placed with the government affairs team, where our basic area of work was to focus on the issues of regulatory affairs in Boeing. So dealing with transport trade issues, dealing with chemical issues of aviation, and dealing with basically any policy issue, not legal issue per se, any policy issue which could affect Boeing's interest, that was being done by us. That was the basic work which we were doing, which we're dealing in Boeing.
All right, sir. And like in furtherance of that, in furtherance of that answer, sir, like can you give us a brief overview into the kind of issues an aviation lawyer deals with, or what are some issues that come about in the aviation law
So
sector?
basically, I'm an aircraft financing lawyer. I'll give you what we face. So not every, by the way, most aircraft in India are on lease. And the lease is basically the lessee in the Indian airline, and the lessor happens to be entity in Ireland, or say in China or any other country. Now, the lease has certain terms of agreement. For example, the lessee defaults on those terms of agreement. Now, the lessor would want to repossess the aircraft, and that repossession would involve certain legal issues.
Right.
Just imagine you are having a car, and not you, anybody having a car, and you default on the car loan. The bank or the mortgage holder will want to repossess that car from you. That involves certain kinds of legal aspects coming in, right? So basically, I mean, as I was saying, so I work as an aircraft financing lawyer, and most aircraft in India are on lease. And every lease has certain lease terms which the lessee has to follow. Now, when the lessee is not following those things, a default happens. And when a default happens, the lessor would want to repossess the aircraft. But that's a lot of. And just to give an example, under normal Indian condition, normal Indian law, we have the SARFAESI Act, which covers the repossession or the rights of a bank. But the SARFAESI Act will not apply to aircraft. If you read Section 30, Clause 4, if I'm not wrong, of SARFAESI Act, it is very clear that this act shall not apply to any aircraft. So for aircraft, we have the treaty known as the Cape Town Convention Treaty, to which India is a party, and the laws made therein. So that requires a lot of legal issues coming in, how we represent the aircraft. Second issue is what we deal through is, for example, an aircraft is being financed in India. So as an Indian lawyer, as an Indian aviation lawyer, we have to give an opinion, or we have to see whether that lease is valid from an Indian aviation law or Indian banking law perspective or not.
Okay.
Because there's certain terms which might be permissible in India or they might be permissible not in India. So that is something which we also see. Apart from that, when we go to aviation liability law. Now, aviation liability law, I'll give you an example for this case. So the normal Consumer Protection Act is the basic law of the country. But in case the flight was international flight, the rules one that are convention.
Okay.
So you have to apply those things which we deal through. The issue of liability. For example, you have an aircraft, say from Delhi to US, and you are going through France. Now the ticket you had was from Delhi, Paris, and Paris to New York. And the leg of flight from New York, from Paris to New York, was being operated by an American carrier, but the ticket was sold by the French carrier. So in that case, the performing carrier is different, and the contracting carrier is different. So we will see how and where the liability has to be managed. So that is something which you face in the area of aviation liability law. Then we have the issue of insurance law coming up. And there's something in insurance law, I'll give you an example. Under normal circumstances, we have this concept of privity of contract. So no third party who was not privy to a contract cannot be a beneficiary or cannot be a party in the contract. But
Right.
in aviation insurance, the insurance is between the lessee and the insurance company, but the lessor is a beneficiary in that contract. So
Okay.
there's certain kinds of new nuances or new innovations which have been made in this basic area of aviation. And that is something which we face on day-to-day basis as an aviation lawyer.
Well, sir, thank you so much for that comprehensive insight into the issues that an aviation lawyer deals with. Now, just to follow up that question, I have a just a
Mhm.
small question with regards to that. Do aviation lawyers also deal with other kind of unmanned aerial vehicles such as drones? Do aviation
Yeah,
lawyers have to deal with them too?
I mean, yes, that is something which is upcoming these days. In fact, if you see the drone rules of India, which were prior to this 2020 rules, they were treating drones as an extension of the aircraft. But now we are the new rules or draft rules for US. They treat drones as a separate entity, and yes, we are dealing with them. I mean, we have concept of drone financing, which is coming up now. The
All
concept
right.
of drone leasing is coming up now, and obviously we have issues of privacy and the issues of I must say privacy and also the issues of this ownership of drones, and that is into leasing part, which is coming up gradually and gradually. And yeah, I believe drones will be the most not drones, but yes, automation will be the most important aspect of aviation in this decade.
All
Because
right.
from your normal planes to everything, automation is the main thing happening. So we might also see that the cockpit, we might see a pilotless cockpit, and
Okay.
that will come with its own way of liabilities and issues coming up. Because I mean, when I was in Boeing, that was something on which the entire Boeing was working upon. That is the
All right.
concept of pilotless cockpit. And the issues which will come up for that is the issues of liability. Say something happens to an aircraft due to a computer error or due to the error of something else. In that case, who has the liability?
That's right.
The manufacturer. Because in most cases, if it's a pilot error, in that case, the airline can be fixed.
So in a way,
But
this
in,
can be linked to the entire debate about liability, that liability question into AIs and automated
yes,
machines. That is,
exactly,
yes.
exactly, exactly. The question would lie here is that the person who has the last control over that machine.
All right.
So it can be the operator of the airline. So obviously, I'm not aware as of now what the technology is, but yeah, this is something which lawyers are pondering over. That in the case of
All
cockpit, pilotless cockpit, uh, whether it will be the airlines or the operator or or the manufacturer, who is going to be liable for any cause of accident or any something which happens.
right. That will be something very interesting to see, I'm sure, in the future.
Yeah.
Now, coming on to some of the more recent issues relating to the fields, recently the International Court of Justice
Hmm.
rejected an appeal filed by four nations, that is
Yeah.
Bahrain, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and the like,
Hmm.
who had basically filed an appeal against the jurisdiction. They were basically arguing that the International Civil Aviation Organization does not have the jurisdiction to rule upon the legality of the blockade they've placed against uh, the state of Qatar, the air blockade. So,
Hmm.
what are your views on the issue? Because it was making quite the headlines. And
Um, in my opinion, see, the basic point here is this, which we need to understand. The entire concept of air law is based on sovereignty.
right,
So the person who has sovereignty over the land will also have sovereignty over the air, right?
right,
And in aviation law, there is no ipso facto right to fly. So
right,
an airlines of Germany can fly over India only because India has permitted it to fly.
right.
You cannot acquire any right to fly, right?
Oh,
And this permission to fly, which India has granted you, is the sole discretion of India. Obviously, it is governed by various other factors, but primarily it's the sole discretion of India. So even if you read Article 1 of the Chicago Convention, it's very clear. It says that air law is based on sovereignty.
right,
So this judgment of ICJ has two aspects. Obviously, in the convention, we also have this thing that the state should not discriminate. So if I'm closing my airspace, say for one reason, that reason has to apply to everybody. It
oh,
cannot be that, okay, I'm closing this for, say, Bahrain or Qatar, but I'm opening this for everybody else. That is something
oh,
which will be illegal as per ICAO rules and convention. But again, the basic concept here is this: from the aspect of sovereignty, you cannot force a country to open its airspace to some other nation just because they have ratified a convention. I'll give you
Point.
example for this. I mean, the most, if you also read that judgment of ICJ, you will
Yeah.
find India-Pakistan dispute has been referred many times because India
Yeah.
has often closed its airspace to Pakistan, and Pakistan has also done the same thing. So
Right.
it is something, yes, ICJ's ruling is fine that yes, ICAO has the potential and has the jurisdiction
Yeah.
to deliver on those points. But again, one thing which we have to keep in mind is even if ICAO delivers, and which they have delivered, saying that the actions of the four nations are illegal or they should not be done. But again, there is no enforcing power which ICAO has.
Right.
And at the end of the day, we all know international law is basically diplomacy. What the
Right.
reality is, I mean, it's my country, it's my airspace, and I have all the right to close my
Right.
airspace for somebody I don't like. Right?
Right.
Obviously, that would be a very simple statement, but that's the basic gist of the international aviation law on airspace.
Right.
A country
Just
can
to
close their airspace.
Right. So just to follow up on that question, that like there would be some grounds or some test required for a nation to pass in order to uphold
Generally, what
those
happens?
restrictions.
Generally, what happens is a country can close airspace on three, four grounds.
Right.
First is military ground. For example, when you are testing certain military weapons, missiles, something, and there is a possibility that it might hit any civilian aircraft. In that case, the country will issue something known as NOTAM.
Oh,
NOTAM is Notice to Airmen,
oh,
and they will say simply that this airspace has been closed. One is this. Second thing is in every country there's certain, I must say, certain important points whose airspace is closed. For example, the airspace over Parliament of India is closed.
oh,
The airspace over any military installation will be closed for
oh,
security reasons, right? Then there's certain things which you close because of an ongoing war. For example, if like in Ukraine, we were having this issue between Russian rebels and the Ukrainian rebels, and that was the reason they closed the airspace. So the primary purpose of closing the airspace is safety in most cases or security. That said, if the relationship between two countries are not very good,
right.
then that country can always invoke their inherent power of sovereignty to close that airspace for that particular country. Now,
Right.
as per international air law, it should not be done because it
Okay.
says that any closure of airspace should be non-discriminatory. It should apply equally to everybody.
Right.
Moreover, you cannot say that I will close my airspace for foreign airlines, but for my own airlines, it will be opened.
Right.
Even that is not permitted.
Oh,
But again, what that's the legal issue or the academic issue. Practically, what we have seen every time since 1945, if a country wants to close its airspace for its for a country which with whom it's not having a good relationship, that might be legal. I must say, in a strict legal sense, academic sense, that practically every country has a right to close its sovereign airspace. So it's basically, I must say, a conflict between sovereignty and a conflict between international rules and regulations.
right. Right.
And in this highly polarized world in which we are living these days, I
Yeah.
believe sovereignty will always take the lead.
That is something quite true, sir. In fact, you have recently published an article that highlights the conflict between international laws and the
Yes.
domestic laws relating to repatriation of aircrafts. Can you tell us more about that article and the issue?
Sure. So before I begin on that, let me tell you. So I'm acting as an amicus curiae before SISTAT,
Oh, okay.
which is the Customs Excise Service Tax Appellate Tribunal.
Right.
And the basic issue which we are dealing with, or in which I'm trying to assist the Honorable SISTAT is, as I have told you before, aircraft in India are brought on lease basis.
Right.
Now, the lessor is an entity which is in, say, in Ireland or in UK, any other country, and the Indian operator lessee is operating the aircraft. Now, when the lessee is violating the aircraft agreement or the lease agreement, the lessor has a right to repossess the aircraft.
Yeah.
Now, when you repossess the aircraft, under India's aviation law, which is India's aircraft rules and India's aircraft act, the lessor has a right to repossess and export the aircraft out of India, right? That is one issue which we have. But exportation is governed by India's customs laws.
Okay.
Now, under Customs Act, on the India's foreign trade policy, you are required to have two basic things without which an export will not be covered.
Oh.
First thing is known as an IEC code. IEC is Importer Exporter Code of India. So any export or import cannot happen unless the exporter or importer is having an IEC code.
Right.
Now, in most cases, the lessee, because the aircraft is imported into India on the lessee's IEC code. But when I have repossessed the aircraft, the lessee is hostile. The lessee is not going to help me, and in that case, he will not provide me with his IEC code. So the the lessor has to export the aircraft on his own basis. Now, because the lessor is not an Indian entity and is not based in India, in any case, he will not be having an IEC code, right? That is where the customs department is going to treat this act of the lessor as an improper export, and the aircraft is liable for confiscation under section 125 of Customs Act.
Okay.
So second issue is GR waiver. So in under India's FEMA law, that is Foreign Exchange Management Act, any exporter should declare something known as EDF, that is Export Declaration Form. And you are only exempted from that if you can provide something known as a GR waiver, a guaranteed remittance waiver. The logic here is this: if anything is going out of India on export basis, certain amount of foreign exchange should come to India.
Oh.
Because it's an international trade happening, right?
Right.
But in certain cases, you can say the money will come after some time. And GR waiver is simply a guaranteed remittance. I guarantee you that the remittance will come back to India. And that is issued by basically AD1 bank or the RBI directly. Now, in most cases, the lessors were facing this problem when they used to approach the AD bank because they had no banking history in India. They could not get a GR from a bank. Now, RBI used to say to them, listen, you go to an AD bank. But that issue has been solved. The main issue is IEC code issue, which the lessors are facing. And it is here what we see is the commitment which India has made while ratifying the Cape Town Convention, where they said that India will allow lessors to export their aircraft out of India without any kind of problem. Whereas in reality, we have seen lessors paying hefty amount of fine or even confiscation of aircraft happening because of this issue of IEC code. Now, another issue and that is the entire issue which the SISTAT has to deal with. But what I am told, and that is something which I'll be moving before SISTAT also, that the government has changed the rule around 4 or 5 months back. And now they have said that for a lessor of an aircraft, if the aircraft is being repossessed, then he shall be exempted from quoting the IEC code.
Okay.
So gradually, India is trying to develop its framework more and more towards, I must say, aviation friendly.
Yes.
But the biggest problem in India we are facing is that certain right you derive are from certain act, and there are certain prohibitions which are from another act. So what we mostly see is you make a commitment, and then one parliamentary statute and rules to implement that commitment. But there happens to be another parliamentary act which is going to stop that ratification or that kind of relief which you can get. So that is something. So what I believe, what we've always said, what India requires in reality is basically alignment of laws.
Okay.
You need to align every law in the best possible manner so that if one law is creating an enabling provision, the another law should not hold it back.
Right.
That is something on which we are working, and that is on very same thing on which SISTAT has to also rule, that whether this conflict between India's customs law, or very I should say India's export control laws and India's aviation law, in light of India's commitment made under Cape Town Convention, is violative of India's commitment or not.
Okay.
That is the basic idea of this on which we are fighting. But as I've told you that the government of India has amended the rules, and now they've exempted lessors from what you call the quoting IEC code. So the matter as of now has been kept on peace.
Right. Well, I believe, as you pointed out before, also that aviation law, you have these conventions in aviation law,
Mhm.
but in effect, what an aviation law actually deals with, or what aviation law actually is, it's a combination of laws. Basically,
Yeah,
lease, you deal with lease, you deal with contracts, and
yeah,
more of
obviously,
a business and financial laws perspective. So,
that
as you
is true.
rightly pointed out, you have to make the whole regime that makes up that aviation law international friendly towards aviation law, and more internationally coherent. And I
I'll give
think
you an
that's a very good
example.
point.
Aviation law is nothing. It's simply a law with an aircraft aspect.
Right,
So when you talk about aircraft financing, it is basically banking and finance law.
right,
When you talk about export of aircraft, you're dealing with India's customs laws,
right,
right? When you talk about insurance of aircraft, you're dealing with insurance law.
right,
Everything you talk about liability of aircraft or of airlines, you're dealing with consumer laws.
right,
So you're basically dealing with the main body of law only.
right,
Simply that you have certain special arrangements which are applicable in this sector,
right,
which you have to keep in mind.
right,
So unless just because you are an aviation enthusiast, that is not
yes,
going to work. I mean, that
right,
will help you a lot, but you should know the law.
right,
You should have a very basic foundation of the laws as such, because unless your basic laws of financing, banking, trade, CPC for that matter,
right,
Surface Act for that matter, or basic liability laws are not strong, we cannot be a good aviation lawyer.
right. I think that is something that is very right that you've pointed out. Now, moving on to the last segment of the question. So, we've seen that as almost like in every other sector, but aviation industry as a whole has had a huge impact because
Mhm.
of the entire COVID-19 pandemic, right? It has every day we see articles that one of the worst hit industries is the aviation
The
sector.
aviation. Mhm.
So, what sort of issues do you think will arise out of the entire situation? Like one we see relating to it's relating to the refund for the bookings that have been made during the lockdown. For certain period before the lockdown, which got cancelled. Another is that a lot of airlines are moving towards bankruptcy due to the revenue crunch. So, what sort of issues do you think will arise?
Uh, I can say one you mentioned rightly is refund issues. The issue of consumer rights is coming up.
Right,
Second issue, which we are seeing a lot, is the issue of leasing.
right.
So every airline has to pay per aircraft a lease rent to the lessor.
Okay,
Now, because the airline is making no money, because the aircrafts are
right,
grounded,
right,
they have no fund left to pay for their lease rentals.
right,
And what happens is they're defaulting on their lease rentals, lease agreement. The basic point here is this, that whether this issue of COVID 19 can be a force major event or not,
okay, yeah,
right? Because if that happens to be a force major event, in that case, the airlines are not required. I mean, they can be exempted to a level, but
right,
it will be, give me a moment, but
right,
it will be what you call, so I'm sorry. What I was saying
right,
is just basically
yeah,
that, see, because of COVID 19, since aircraft are grounded,
right,
airlines have no revenue left and they are unable to pay their lease rentals.
right,
But because they cannot pay their lease rentals, the lessors are enforcing their basically bank guarantees, or they are seeing a default is happening, or they want to repossess their aircraft. But the problem here is this, that it is something which is happening globally. So when Jet went bankrupt, the aircraft of Jet were repossessed and were given to airlines in India or abroad. But
right,
today, if you repossess the aircraft from an airline, there is no other customer, because the problem here is it's happening globally. And second issue which we are facing is that whether this can be an event of force majeure or not.
right.
Just to give you an example, the concept of force majeure does not apply in leases.
Okay, yes,
Yeah. In no lease. It can be any
yes,
lease. In lease, there is no concept of force majeure, because
right,
a lease is a contract which has been already executed,
exactly,
right? So what we see is the concept of frustration.
right,
That because of this, the contract has become frustrated, and therefore
right,
the contract cannot be performed further.
yes,
So this is the biggest issue which the lessors and the lessees airlines are facing, and that issue is Previously, the lessees or the airline were in a bad position, but today, as of now, because of COVID, even lessors have no say because they know even if we repossess, there is no
Right.
other customer
Exactly.
because half of the world fleet is grounded. Nobody want to purchase new aircraft or take new aircraft. So you have
Right.
simply an asset which has become of no use. That is one issue which we are facing a lot. Second issue which we are facing is the issue of employment law. So many airlines are changing their contract with their pilots or with their ground staff.
Right.
Many are being laid off. Many are being retrenched. That is something which is not only in aviation, it's happening everywhere, by the way. Third most issue, which is a global issue, is the issue of refund, by the way. So most, like in every country, we have a specific law for aviation consumers, which is not in India, by the way. In India, we
Right.
follow the Consumer Protection Act.
Right.
But in every law, if the flight has not been operated,
Right.
the airline is bound to refund the money. This credit shall will only work out if the customer agrees. If
Right.
consumer says no, I want the refund, the airline has no other option, but they have to pay back the entire money. Now, in a
Right.
situation like this, when there is no fund left and airlines being forced to pay all these, I must say, refunds, it's a very bad situation for them. And that is something which is leading towards more bankruptcy. Now, when
Right.
we go to bankruptcy, I mean, bankruptcy is something which I'm sure it should not come to light because
Right.
of, I'm sure government will do something. And because nobody wants a consecutive failure of airlines. I mean, last year was Jet, and this time it
Right.
can be something else. But when we talk about bankruptcy in India, something which is very important is the conflict between IBC and the
Right.
conflict between India's obligation under Cape Town Convention.
Right.
Because the moment proceeding under IBC is started and accepted, a notice is issued, the concept of basically that a lessor has an access to repossess the aircraft goes away. Because till
Right.
the time the proceedings are going on, no lessor or creditor can repossess anything. And
Right.
that is the biggest conflict, biggest, I must say, direct assault on India's, I must say, commitment at Cape Town Convention. And that is something which will happen a lot. And that is something which also worries us as aviation lawyers. Because if that happens, then because India is a very good market, by the way, for lessors. And
Right.
because of this conflict happening, many lessors are now saying that unless India aligns the law properly, we are going to charge higher rentals. And when the lessors are charging higher rentals, at the end of the day, that is coming back to us
Right.
because we'll pay higher fares. So I believe that is something which will have to be looked up. So the what we are demanding as industry is that the government of India should bring a Cape Town Convention Act, a
Right.
parliamentary statute which should override any other law which will be in conflict with the Cape Town Convention Act,
Exactly. Right.
something like the Maritime Act.
Right.
So if there happens to be a conflict between the Maritime Act and the IBC, it is the maritime law which is going to prevail over IBC.
Right.
So that is something which we'll face a lot. And yeah, so these are something which we are facing and which for sure we'll face if the situation is not controlled or things don't get better.
Right. I must ask this question, sir. This is slightly on lighter note. You are an aviation enthusiast. I've seen that. I've seen your posts. You write a lot about different aircrafts and everything. So, as an aviation enthusiast, do you think that air travel or the airline industry will ever be the same again? Because the
Uh,
dynamic has completely changed.
well, I cannot say that I'm an expert on aircraft market industry, but yeah, as a lawyer practicing in this field, I can say one thing for sure that what the industry was before March 2020,
Right.
to come back to that level again, it will require at least a decade.
All right.
Yeah, because things have changed very badly. I mean, you have seen Avianca is on the verge of bankruptcy.
Right.
Lufthansa is also not doing well. In India, SpiceJet, we all know, very bad shape. Indigo, not in a good shape. Um, it's all over the world.
Right.
And then the biggest issue which is there is the issue of passenger confidence.
Exactly.
That is the biggest issue. So whether the traveling will be same or not, because now what we are seeing is lockdown or social distancing has become the new normal, right?
Right.
And this new normal will take certain more years to get back into the pre March 2020 phase. And until that thing happens, because even today the flights are flying on a very reduced capacity.
Right.
International travel has simply gone to, I must say, 10% or 5%.
Right.
Otherwise, August, May, or June used to be a very good season for airlines. Now it's nothing. It's all like if you go to an airport, it's simply a deserted area.
Right.
So I believe, yeah, to come back to that pre-March 2020 period, it will require at least 5-6 years more, if
Right.
not a decade. That
Right.
is something. Yeah.
I think this is a very important point that so you have correctly that you've pointed out that leaving these technicalities aside, one important thing that we have to focus on is passenger confidence because
Yes.
people need to develop that trust that okay, it's safe to travel via air again. So I think
Yes.
that's a very important point that we must focus on.
And one more thing I'll tell you, talking about this,
Yeah.
that even if we talk about automation,
Right.
so even that requires passenger confidence. Will you
Right.
fly an aircraft from, say, Delhi to Bangalore or to Lucknow, which has no pilot?
Right.
So you might have
Right.
crossed the scientific hurdle and
Right.
the regulatory hurdle, but to
Mhm.
cross a social hurdle, that okay,
Right.
yes, I have the technology, I have the permission, but do I have the passengers?
Yes.
That is the biggest issue which airlines will face. Automation
Right.
is something which is very, I must say, very good, very impressive, but that's also very frightening.
Right.
It's scary for many people flying at 30,000 feet with no pilot.
Right.
So, yeah, confidence is also something which the industry will have to gain.
Right.
Might
I
be
think that
quit,
is why it is
might be,
mentioned that law
yeah.
always deals with the social perspective, so you have to cross social hurdles if you have to enforce a law,
Obviously,
because if
obviously,
people don't
obviously.
accept that law, then there's no point, that law is bound to fail.
I always say that any technology has three hurdles to cross.
Right.
The first is the technological hurdle.
Right.
Okay, now we want this thing to happen, but there is no technology. So that's a
Right.
scientific hurdle. That is done by basically scientists and engineers.
Right.
You work on that, and now you have a technology through which an aircraft can fly without a pilot. You've
Right.
crossed that hurdle. The second hurdle is you have the technology, you have the science, but then the laws don't permit that.
Right.
You approach the government, you approach the regulators, and you convince them. You show to them that listen, this is safe,
Right.
and then you get the certification and permit. So now you've crossed the second step. So you have the
Right.
technology, you have the permission, but the
Right.
most important is the psychological hurdle, that
Right.
whether passengers will fly or not. So you have
Right.
the permission, you have the technology, but that is of no use if there are no passengers.
Right.
So any technology in any sector for that matter has to cross three hurdles: the technological hurdle, the regulatory hurdle, and the passenger confidence hurdle.
Right.
So unless you cross those hurdles, the first is done by engineers, second by regulators, and third is done by people. So,
Right.
and the most difficult thing is to convince people.
Right. I think this is a very important takeaway. This is, I think, the highlight point of this entire conversation. And I believe it is a fantastic point that you've made. Now, coming on to the last question, sir, what would your advice be to aviation law enthusiasts who are passionate about this field but are not very sure about the opportunities? What is your advice?
Well, opportunities will be there for sure because India is poised to become one of the biggest aviation market in the world. We have a rising middle class, we
Right.
have a huge population, and we have a vast area. So
Right.
obviously, we'll require traveling, we'll require aircraft, everything for that matter.
Right.
I would always say, make your foundation sound. Work on your banking law, work on your liability law, work on your civil laws, because
Right.
that is what you will deal in the future.
Right.
So work on those laws, then know what the industry wants. So as I always say, I have been told what makes a good lawyer are four things. The first thing is you must have the academic knowledge.
Correct.
You must know what subject I need to know for this industry. Second thing is you must be disciplined. You
Correct.
must be committed that yes, I have to do this thing. Third thing, you must know what is something which your industry wants. So if you know the law, you are disciplined. But if you do not know what aviation industry wants from you, it's of
Correct.
no use. And fourth thing is a lawyer must be fearless. You
Correct.
should have the guts to say that, listen, this is illegal.
Correct.
If you have the law, if you know the law, you are disciplined, you know what the industry wants. But if you're not strong enough to say on the face, listen, it is wrong, it
Correct.
won't work out, you cannot be a lawyer.
Correct.
So these 4 points make one a good lawyer.
Correct.
So yeah, I mean, know the law, that's the basic, because you're lawyers.
Yeah.
Know the industry, what the industry wants, know how it is going to develop in the coming 5 years. Because see, what we were thinking before March 2020 will not apply anymore.
Right, sir.
It has changed. It has changed drastically.
Right.
So see now how things are going to work out. One thing for sure, which will be very important, is automation. Drones and
Right.
automation is going to be the new normal in aviation.
Right.
So be on that part. And yeah, I believe once you are thorough with these things, opportunities will come across. I mean, yeah.
Uh, Thank you so much, sir. This was truly a fascinating as well as an insightful conversation. I'm sure for the viewers, but for me personally as well, I've learned so much
All
from
praise
this
to mine.
conversation. In a comprehensive way, I've learned about some issues and what an aviation lawyer deals with, and why it is important to be strong with other foundational laws, as you correctly pointed out. Thank you so much, sir. Once again, it was an
Thank you.
honor to have you here.